Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning. We're going to give it a couple of minutes before we get started, but we're real happy to have you here. So it's 11:30 now. We are going to give it about 2 more minutes just to let everyone join, but we will get started in a couple of minutes. Okay, I think we're ready to begin. Good morning, and thanks for joining us for this morning's workshop, Making Improvements for a More Resilient Home. So welcome. My name's Christine Condon. I am an Energy and Sustainability Analyst with the County of Sonoma's Energy and Sustainability Division, and I'll be your presenter today. Joining me today is Patricia Ramirez. She's an administrative aide with the division. She focuses on the Sonoma County Energy Independence Program financing and also plays a very strong role in the Green Business Certification Program. Let's see, she'll be assisting with the workshop by monitoring the chat for questions, which we will answer at the end of the presentation. Just a little bit of information about the workshop. You are all muted, and again, we will address questions that are input into the chat. Following the workshop, a link to the recording of the workshop will be sent out to all participants. So not many people realize that the county has an energy and sustainability division, or if they do, they don't realize the number of services that we offer to the community. The division was originally created in 2006 to address internal county energy use and in order to mitigate climate change through greenhouse gas reduction. In 2009, our first community-facing program was introduced, the Sonoma County Energy Independence Program, also known as SCIPE. SCIPE was the first and is the longest running residential property assessed clean energy or PACE financing program. Since then, the program has provided financing for Sonoma County property owners for energy and water saving improvements as a tool in reducing greenhouse gas emissions, And the program has since been expanded to include wildfire safety and seismic strengthening improvements. Since that time, we have also added a number of community resources and services. We assist county residents through a variety of services and programs. We work with cities, towns, special districts, and businesses and residents to increase energy efficiency and resilience in their buildings through energy and resiliency retrofit project planning, rebates, and financing. We offer the county's PACE financing program to property owners for energy, water, solar, battery backup, wildfire safety, and seismic strengthening improvements. We offer no-cost consultation services and where we provide impartial information to educate community members so they can make informed decisions related to building improvements. And we provide project planning services to help identify resources such as incentives, rebates, and financing to get projects done. We host numerous workshops and trainings for the community and contractors for workforce development. And we also partner with a variety of agencies to offer programs and services to the community. So today we're going to talk about actions that property owners can take to reduce the vulnerability of buildings during earthquakes and wildfires, with strategies for home hardening and seismic strengthening. First, we're going to talk about actions that property owners can take to reduce the vulnerabilities of buildings during wildfire. A home's odds of surviving wildfire can be substantially improved through careful attention to three principles: thoughtful landscape design, retrofitting and hardening homes to resist wildfire, and implementing ongoing maintenance of the home and landscaping to reduce combustible materials, for example, leaves and needles, and to address wear and tear that a home can incur over time. Today, I'm going to focus on construction hardening of the structure and creating defensible space in the zone that is in closest proximity to the structure. For more information about vegetation management, we've included a slide at the end of this part of the presentation with links to some of the many excellent resources that have been developed over the past few years in response to the recent California wildfires. So according to the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, IBHS, during wildfires, as many as 90% of homes and buildings damaged or destroyed were first ignited by embers or other fires set by embers and not the main wildland front. So homes do ignite through direct flame exposure, radiant heat, but the main cause of loss home loss during a wildfire is because of embers. So some of the ways that we can harden the home and create a safer environment and protect our homes is, first of all, we want to look at vulnerabilities on the structure itself and harden the structure to prevent ignition. We want to look at fuels within 100 feet surrounding the home and create defensible space. And then we want to really pay attention to weather. So really important if you're going to mow or do yard work when there are red flag warnings or high wind advisories and high temperature advisories, that we always avoid mowing after 10 a.m. or and never on a hot and windy day. So this image is one of many images from wildfire home retrofit guides that show these critical kind of ember resistant zone closest to the structure. In this guide, it's referred to as the 0 or zone 0. Other guides will refer to this zone as zone 1, but today I like the zone 0 reference. Just makes it shows that it's the most critical area, and it is the area that we have the most control over. So in this area, we want to reduce the vulnerability of the home by creating a zone of ember-resistant materials around the home. We want to harden the structure. Hardscape is commonly used in this zone, and the zone includes areas under and around attached decks. So here we want to keep this area clear of any wood piles, wood mulch, and flammable vegetation and stuff. Stuff is a really important consideration. Anything flammable in this zone is not recommended, and particularly during red flag warnings and these high temperature events that we're experiencing. This is when you really want to consider clearing these combustible items out of this area, this zone 0. So here is a list of high priority areas to focus on for home hardening. Because embers are the primary source of ignition during a wildfire for homes, our priority here is to focus on horizontal surfaces and areas prone to accumulation of combustible debris. So these areas include that we're going to focus on are the roof and the roof edge, vents, vegetation and defensible space, windows and doors, decks, patios and porches, and siding. So the first area that we're going to talk about is home hardening at the roof. So the roof covering and edge are the most vulnerable part of the home. Because of its large flat surface, the roof has the most severe exposure to wildfire embers, and it's the area most prone to accumulation of combustible debris. So you can see in this image, the middle image on the left-hand side of the slide here, there are where the horizontal plane, or it's a sloped plane, but it's pretty horizontal, that meeting that vertical siding. So you've got combustible siding, whether or not that roof surface is kind of a fire-resistant roof surface, all of that leaf debris and leaf litter that is accumulating there in that area next to the siding. That siding looks like it's wood, combustible siding. So that can be a real problem, a real vulnerable area during a wildfire event, particularly because of flying embers. So here is just the important point here is it doesn't always take a major retrofit to harden your home. All of this combustible debris is something that we can take care of on an ongoing basis, and it's does take generally climbing on a ladder, but really important to take care of these kind of no-cost, low-hanging fruit opportunities. Also, the roof edge is a vulnerable spot. So if you've got large gaps between the roof covering and the roof sheathing, for example, at the top, in the top image is an illustration of a barrel designed clay tile that has no bird stopping in the end. And here embers, combustible debris can accumulate, embers can intrude and cause all sorts of problems, in addition, including igniting the wood-based sheathing and the fascia board on the roof surface. Other areas that are vulnerable, roof gutters can be vulnerable at the roof edge where the gutters are attached, and vegetative debris can ignite and spread that's in the roof gutters. So how we can reduce the vulnerability of the roofs is, number one, we can remove vegetative debris from the roof, inspect and maintain and replace roofs in poor condition, and replace wood shake or older shingle roofs with Class A roofing. So a Class A roof is a roof surface designed to withstand a burning box of wood for 1 hour before burning through. So that's what the Class A kind of distinction represents. Some examples of Class A roofing include um, asphalt fiberglass composition shingles, so your asphalt comp shingles, clay tiles, cementitious tiles, and metal roofing when it is actually in a system that has the proper underlayment and ridge caps um, that must be installed to avoid fuel accumulation. So here also really important to block openings if there's a space between the roofing material and the roof deck, and inspect the roof edge to see that the metal drip edge is installed to cover the plywood roof deck edge. So it's just something that you can visually inspect. It's required for new construction, but older homes can often be missing this roof metal drip edge on the roof surface. So something to take a look at. You know, that's a vulnerable area. And keep rain gutters obsessively clean. Here, the vegetative debris part, really important, and it's something that we can all take care of on an ongoing basis, really important. And install non-combustible gutter covers with non-combustible gutters. That really takes care of a lot of the issue. You still have to maintain that gutter area to make sure that there's not debris accumulating on top of the roof, the gutter covers, but it's a lot easier to do than cleaning the gutters. So it's actually a really effective measure to incorporate into your home's project planning. So the next area we're going to talk about are vents, under eave, attic, and foundation vents. So here we want to open eave construction is very vulnerable with or without vents, and that's illustrated in the top left image. So you see that open eave construction where flying embers can kind of get caught underneath that area and cause issues. 1/4-inch vent screens are very common for vents, and embers large enough to pass through a 1/4-inch screen can ignite fine fuels. And often folks store things in their attic and sometimes in their crawl space. So that can make your home more vulnerable. So that's something to pay attention to. Gable end vents are more vulnerable to wind-blown embers. So an example or an image of the gable end vent is the top right image. And then foundation or crawl space vents are also vulnerable to ember intrusion. So you can see that lower image of a crawl space vent where you have combustible debris right below the crawl space vent also. So that can be very problematic. So that's an area to pay attention to. So here's some ways that we can reduce the vulnerability of vents in our home. We can opt for soffitted eave design for under eave inlet vents. So we want to look at kind of enclosed soffitted eaves. Install 1/16 inch to 1/8 inch mesh over vents, and that can help prevent those larger or embers from intruding into those areas. And here you want to take care that you're paying attention to the airflow that's required in those areas. So we want to leave enough kind of free air, net free air area in the grills for moisture mitigation in those crawl space areas and attics, but definitely look at reducing the size of the mesh that's over your vents. Install ember resistant gable end vents, and then invest in ember and flame resistant wildland urban interface rated vents. The state fire marshal has a website of materials where they list WUI rated vents, and that link is included in the slide with wildfire safety resources. So it's a good reference tool for when you're trying to find what vents do qualify under this category. And then reduce what's stored in the attic and crawl space. That's problematic for airflow. Insulation can be compressed because of storage in the attic. But also if embers do get into those areas, if you have flammable materials being stored in those spaces, that can really exasperate the situation and cause a lot of problems. So how to reduce the vulnerability in the 0 to 5 foot zone. So this is that an area right in close proximity to your home, that zone 0 we were talking about. One is combustible stuff, including deck furniture, wooden ladders, brooms, wooden tools. You can see one of the images on the right-hand side has a pitchfork and what used to be a broom that caught fire when an ember landed on it. And luckily this home survived, but you can see that that actually was a problem. So any kind of combustible wood materials should be moved out of this critical zone to kind of eliminate this vulnerability. And you can see all sorts of examples of combustible stuff, right? So wood piles, those core rug entry mats, and then there's a dog coming out of a pet door. That can be a problem when the wind is blowing. You can have problems with ember intrusion, but it's also a really important thing to think about if you're evacuated or there's red flag warnings to kind of close up those pet doors because they can flap open and be a problem. Wood piles should be stored 30 feet away from buildings or stored inside or covered with a non-flammable tarp. And then propane tanks really ideally should be 30 feet away from the home with a 10-foot non-combustible zone around the tank, or the tank can be enclosed in a non-combustible enclosure, for example, like CMU block or something like that. But it's really something to pay attention to. There's a very bad example on the right hand lower end of the slide that shows just overgrown grass right next to the propane tank. So really something to be aware of and cognizant of and clear up that area. So so here in this zone, we want to remove woody plants in this zone. And if you're going to plant at all, think about fire resistant plant materials. And we have also some information about plant selection in this area in our slide towards the end. And remove vegetation within 5 feet of windows and glass doors. They represent a vulnerability in the home's surface. And so having flammable vegetation in the zone is a bad idea. Also use non-combustibles mulch in this area. So we want to avoid combustible wood, bark, and rubber mulch products. Rubber is a real problematic material if it ignites. It may take a little longer to ignite, but once it does, it puts off a lot of really noxious fumes, makes it very difficult for firefighters to be around in proximity to it when it's ignited. And it's very difficult to extinguish the fire with rubber mulch. So it's not a good idea in that zone 0. Don't install small pieces of bark or very combustible gorilla hair mulch in this zone. And in walkways and hardscaping areas around the home, use pavers, rock mulch, or pea gravel. And it can be really attractive. That image on the right is a good example of, gravel in close proximity to the home. And then you can use a permeable path material that's non-combustible, and then really nice rainwater catchment cistern there that can really help with resilience too, and help you water your plants during the drought. So I thought this was a really good example of how to manage that area in close proximity to the home. And this area includes, as I mentioned before, areas under and around attached decks. So gravel under and around attached decks, or some other type of material that's non-combustible is a really good idea. So here we've got another area in the 0 to 5, another element in the 0 to 5 foot critical zone, fences. So attached fences that come right up to the home. Here, a really good practice is to replace the combustible portion of your fence that meets the home, that actually leads up to the home, with a non-combustible fence. Here we want a minimum of a 5 to 10 foot long non-combustible section. And a nice example, a horrible example is this top picture, that scary example there that shows the fire kind of wicking along the wooden fence and then actually reaching the home. But really good examples on the bottom, where a metal fence is actually kind of acting as a fire break between that combustible wooden fence, which are very common to have wooden fences, but it can really help mitigate that fire spread. And then here again, you want to remove vegetative debris. So we want to kind of diligently remove vegetative debris anywhere around our homes. I mean, that's a really important practice. But you want to look at the base of your combustible fence and also keep that clear of combustible debris. So another area we're going to talk about is windows and doors. Windows and glass doors can be vulnerable if the framing material ignites, and if glass breaks or falls out, allowing embers or flames to enter the home. The most vulnerable part of the window is the glass, and single pane windows are highly vulnerable to breaking when exposed to wildfire conditions. So here we can kind of address the vulnerability of windows and doors. One thing we can do that doesn't take a financial investment, but close windows and doors during wildfire events. And this really important for preventing ember intrusion, but also for smoke intrusion too. So keep your doors closed during doors and windows closed during wildfire events. Remove or prune flammable plants and shrubs near trees, and replace single pane windows with dual pane windows that have at least one pane of tempered glass. And that's a wildland urban interface requirement if you're in one of the WUI zones, but it's a best practice for anyone in areas that are prone to wildfires. Better practice, and that's more and more research is showing that the best practice is to actually have two panes of tempered glass in your dual pane assembly. Adds cost to the project, but it does. There are many areas in the home where it's already required to have tempered glass because of just for safety issues. But best practice, two panes of tempered glass for windows and doors. And then because tempered glass is 3 to 4 times more resistant to heat exposure than typical annealed glass. Annealed glass will fail at 234 degrees Fahrenheit versus tempered glass, which can withstand up to 665 degrees Fahrenheit. Metal window screens can help improve the performance of glass exposed to radiant heat, and window covers and non-combustible shutters are actually a solution also. So here we're going to talk about decks, patios, and porches. So this is in that zone 0, attached decks and patios and porches. So if attached decks ignite, the home can be exposed to flames and radiant heat. Embers can also directly ignite deck boards. Combustible materials under and on top of decks increase vulnerability. The most common decking materials are combustible. Materials including redwood and cedar. And decks that overhang slopes are more vulnerable to flames from downslope vegetation. So just got a couple of scary pictures here. One of a deck that ignited likely from embers falling on the deck. And then a bad example of, or a very good example of what not to do, what not to store under your deck, a bunch of dry lumber. That definitely increases vulnerability. So some of the things you can do to reduce the vulnerability of decks, and we're going to focus on decks here, but this also applies to any attached porches, any kind of combustible horizontal surfaces attached to the home. Here you want to, again, create an ember resistant zone under and around decks. You could, if your deck's in pretty good shape and you have no intention or you don't or have the resources to replace it with a non-combustible deck, you could potentially replace the deck boards that are within the first few feet next to the house with non-combustible material on the combustible deck. So you can just, you can see there's a picture of a ledger board that's metal that's meeting the house. And there's also metal flashing on the board that attaches the deck to the house. So those are just kind of ways to do a smaller scale retrofit that can really help. It's a fire stop kind of idea, the same idea as the fencing, where you've got a combustible material, but you can put a non-combustible material to block that fire from wicking right up to the home's siding, buy you a little bit of time. You can use non-combustible or ignition-resistant higher density decking products for new and replacement decks. Again, you can refer to that the California Fire Marshal Materials listing link that we have in the slide towards the end for examples of high density, ignition resistant, or non-combustible decking materials. Here I mentioned that installing the metal flashing between the ledger board and the joist to protect combustible siding. You can always remove debris. So here we're talking about removing debris that accumulates between the deck board gaps, something to really pay attention to. You can cover an existing combustible deck with a non-combustible surface, which is shown in a couple of these slides. One of them is it's actually shown where the tile is actually installed over a wooden deck surface. I think it's really attractive, and it's a nice way to upgrade your deck if it has the capacity to carry the load, but update your deck and make it have a non-combustible surface and reduce the vulnerability there. If you're going to store combustible materials under your deck, you could enclose the underside of the deck with non-combustible siding, but again, really have to make sure that you're ventilating that enclosed area so you're not causing moisture problems. So you don't want to just prevent wildfire and then cause dry rot. I mean, that is not the intention here. So really pay attention to those types of upgrades. Make sure that we're covering all our bases and keeping our homes hardened and resilient. Siding is another area that can be vulnerable. It's vulnerable to extended exposure to flames and radiant heat. Nearby structures can dramatically increase a home's vulnerability. Gaps in combustible siding are very vulnerable to hot embers lodging and burning. Partly decayed wood is more vulnerable, and accumulated debris on horizontal surfaces that are adjacent to vertical siding increase the risk of ignition from embers. So pretty good examples. I think they're very clear, just showing kind of the difference in, well, here's the top picture shows accumulated debris that ignited from embers, windblown embers, and then just starting to spread to the siding. There's a picture of a wildfire testing operation there where it's showing, you know, a little wildfire igniting a combustible siding versus a non-combustible siding. Some older aged wood siding that's very vulnerable, and the debris accumulating where the horizontal plane meets the vertical plane. And we have an example of combustible siding that's actually meeting right at the floor or the ground level. That becomes very vulnerable when that's combustible. Some of the ways we can reduce the vulnerability: use non-combustible siding like 3-coat stucco or cement board. There are others. Replace dry rot, sealed joints and cracks that are greater than 1/16 of an inch. Maintains at least 6 inches of vertical non-combustible zone from the ground where the siding begins to where the siding begins. So you can see there's an image down at the bottom where, well, that's the concrete foundation that kind of gives another fire break between the ground surface and the siding. There's gravel ground cover next to the 6-inch concrete foundation. So it all acts as kind of a fire break, but you could potentially replace just that lower board or cover that lower board with a non-combustible material like a cement board to give you a little bit of a fire break there and keep the ground area around adjacent to the home clear of combustible debris. And you could potentially, if you're not in the position to replace all of your siding, if you've got complex roof assemblies like shown in that middle image, where the kind of roof plane changes and it's hard to reach that area and keep the combustible debris away, it's a candidate for a partial siding replacement, which would be much less expensive than your whole house. So you could see what areas are very vulnerable and consider a partial replacement. So there are co-benefits to home hardening that address a lot of energy efficiency, indoor air quality and comfort issues, high performance windows, air sealing of your home where you either do it yourself or you hire someone to come in and caulk and seal all the cracks and penetrations in the building envelope. That's very helpful for mitigating ember intrusion, but also for indoor air quality during wildfire events. If you're deciding to re-side your home, it's a great opportunity to add insulation to uninsulated walls. If you're going to re-roof and you have mechanical air conditioning, great option to kind of look at cool roofing materials, which are just kind of lighter colored roofing materials, but not the white kind of coating that you see on commercial roofs, but there's very attractive options for cool roofing. So you could, in addition to a Class A roof, you could choose a cool roof. And if you're installing a high efficiency heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system, they now come with really great filtration. So that's another kind of hardening strategy, but it's really for indoor air quality and comfort where you can keep your windows closed up. Like if you have a good heat pump system, keep your windows closed, run your HVAC system and to recirculate the air and keep the air filtered inside really helps you kind of ride out those smoke events. And if you're going to purchase air purifiers, make sure they're Energy Star. Some insurance premiums will be lowered, or there can be kind of credits for your insurance policy, especially in WUI areas when you install some of these hardening measures, and they enhance resale value and more. There's more benefits. So we're going to roll into earthquake safety, but I wondered, Patricia, is there anything that we need to address at this time as far as in the chat?
There's only one question so far.
Okay.
They're asking, we have a carport that is open on two sides. Is the county going to allow us to enclose this and make it ember proof without a huge cost in permit fees? And they're stating it's a wooden structure.
So my advice to you when you have a question about the county and building department regulations, if you want to enclose an open carport, that will likely trigger some possibly a permit with the building department. So I would contact, I don't know what jurisdiction you're in, but your local building department. If you're in the unincorporated area of the county, then you would contact Permit Sonoma. And if you're in one of the city jurisdictions, you contact your building department and talk to them about what it would entail. They're very helpful. So if you have questions about that, totally reach out to them. Many things trigger a permit. So really worth checking in with your building department. So now we're going to talk about seismic strengthening and earthquake safety. So here, homes built before 1980, especially those with raised floor or crawl spaces, are very vulnerable to earthquakes. damage during earthquakes. Also, unreinforced masonry chimneys are vulnerable components in a home. So a stem wall house has a wood framed first floor resting directly on a raised concrete perimeter foundation. Generally, the stem wall retrofit for an earthquake upgrade, a seismic strengthening upgrade, consists of bolting the house sill plates to the foundation using foundation plates. So it's a pretty straightforward kind of brace and bolt upgrade, the least expensive type of upgrade, just when it just requires kind of foundation bolts. And so this is one situation where you can really do some perform some good upgrades and make your home less vulnerable to earthquakes. The issue here is when the home is not securely connected to the foundation, it can actually slide off the foundation during an earthquake. So this is the most straightforward seismic upgrade. Here we have another kind of stem wall condition, but it's called a cripple wall, where they're kind of taller walls. And if your home has a crawl space with unbraced walls, these crawl space or cripple walls could collapse during an earthquake, which in turn may cause your entire home to collapse or lead to major damage to the structure, as well as fire and water line breaks and injuries. So here, when you get into homes with a cripple wall condition, we'd be looking at adequate bracing, which is plywood or diagonal sheathing on exterior walls. And you can see there's some examples of where those are placed, those plywood sheathing panels in right over the cripple walls. And so adequate bracing is with those plywood or diagonal sheathing components installed. And then without the plywood, it's not, the bracing is not adequate. So another example of a home that is very vulnerable to earthquake damage is a post and pier home. So if your home sits on large wooden posts that rest on unconnected concrete piers, the posts may not be braced properly. And during an earthquake, the post could fail and your home can shift or collapse. Adequate bracing includes installing a continuous foundation around the perimeter edges of the home that consists of either reinforced concrete or reinforced masonry. This is a more expensive, for sure, engineered solution, but really can help to decrease the vulnerability of a post and pier house during an earthquake. Another condition is a soft story house. If your home has a room above the garage, then that is considered a soft story condition. And you need to ensure that the narrow walls on either side of the garage doorway are strong enough to withstand earthquake shaking. And without adequate support, these walls could collapse, causing serious damage and injuries. And we see a lot of examples of that happening in the marina during previous earthquakes in San Francisco. So there's a real, it's something to pay attention to. You want to definitely consider bracing your garage walls to be sure that they can structurally hold the home during an earthquake. If the garage has been built or strengthened to support a second story, you'll see plywood bracing on the walls and metal straps. If you do not know what to look for, consult a licensed engineer or architect. This is definitely an engineered solution, but something to consider if your home has this condition. Another area to take a look at are masonry chimneys. In the 2014 Napa earthquake, about half of the residential buildings that were damaged it was due to unreinforced brick chimneys. So here's something else to consider. To keep the bricks from falling through the roof during an earthquake, here are some reinforcement options. Add layers of plywood on the roof around the chimney. Remove the upper part of the chimney that can twist and turn during shaking and replace it with metal. Add diagonal steel bracing to the chimney. So more expensive retrofits involve removing the chimney completely or rebuilding it. If the homeowner doesn't need the chimney to be functional, retrofitting could be as simple as placing a steel tube down the structure and filling it with concrete. So that's kind of an overview of seismic strengthening. We have a lot of great resources here on the next slide for seismic strengthening. I wanted to kind of leave you with because there's so much good information out there. This first slide is the wildfire safety resources that I talked about, a big focus on landscape vegetation management that we talked about before, and plant selection that we didn't really address in our presentation. But there's some great resources here, and we're going to be sending you guys the slides. The next slide will be on the one program is the Earthquake Brace and Bolt program. That's a statewide program. They generally start a lottery annually where they award folks that actually win the lottery. I think it's a $3,000 grant, and they release that. They open that up every year. So I haven't seen one open this year. I think they had enough of a waiting list last year, something that they filled the list already, but worth taking a look at that and signing up for notification if earthquake retrofit is something that you're interested in. The Association of Bay Area Governments, they actually have great resources at this website. And one of the things they have is if you're a contractor or a builder kind of owner and you're interested in earthquake retrofitting as a homeowner or property owner, they have this canned set of plans that most jurisdictions will accept that shows kind of standard conditions for stem wall and small cripple wall bracing, including plywood and bracing and bolting. And the plywood needs to have a certain amount of ventilation holes drilled into it. So the plan set actually clearly illustrates that, and you can actually submit that to the building department if you want to do the earthquake upgrade yourself. As long as it doesn't require an engineered solution, that's acceptable. And then Cal OES has great information about earthquake preparedness. So one thing I did want to talk about is the Sonoma County Energy Independence Program. That's our property assessed clean energy program that we offer in our office through the county. It's a financing program where you can finance energy efficiency, wildfire safety, and seismic strengthening improvements, and solar and resilience like battery charging, battery backup systems, electric vehicle charging stations. We offer this financing at a 10 or 20-year term with a fixed interest rate and low fees. The financing is paid back through your property taxes through the county tax bill system. There's no income or credit qualifying for this financing program. And like I said, these are some of the categories of improvements that we are able to finance with over 100 different improvements. So some of the eligible improvements we talked about in this slide presentation, new roofing, non-combustible gutters, non-combustible downspouts. Gutters must have gutter covers installed to be eligible for financing. Solar electric systems, solar thermal systems for water heating also, battery storage, wildland urban interface rated attic eave and foundation vents, soffitted enclosures for eaves, siding replacement, window replacements, and glass door replacements, hardscaping within the first 5 feet of the home. And then we also can look at custom wildfire safety improvements and evaluate kind of what is financeable And we'll look at those with you. Seismic strengthening, including direct and indirect costs. So that includes engineering and structural kind of plans, engineering calculations, things like that. So in addition to the project implementation costs. So to find out more about our financing program, this is a direct link, and you can easily start an application online or reach out to us. We have great staff that can offer advice and support and help you kind of understand the program and what's financeable. Now, in addition to the financing program, one of the things I mentioned earlier is we offer consultations in our office at no cost. And these consultations are better building consultations where we talk about energy efficiency, resilience upgrades, like we can talk about wildfire safety, construction hardening, seismic strengthening, and they're extremely valuable consultations. Usually they take about an hour, and you can contact our office to schedule. We also offer solar consultations and financing consultations. So another thing that we can look at is we help folks understand bids. So we always recommend that folks get multiple bids for projects. The Contractor State License Board recommends a minimum of 3 bids. So that's something that we also recommend. And we often work with folks to take a look at bids. And this is whether or not you are interested in financing or any of our other programs. These are no cost consultations that we offer, and we can take a look at bids with you and help you understand what's included, what's not included. And it's again, another real valuable service. And then also direct you to financing resources and incentive resources. So there's a link to schedule a consultation. And then now we're at our questions. So anything that we need to address, Patricia?
No, the only other question was how will they be able to access the video recording? So I just wanted to remind everybody that we'll be sending a link to this video recording and the presentation within the next few days.
And then my last slide here is I need to change that because we don't have a virtual storefront anymore. We're always going to be available virtually, but we have an in-person storefront. So we actually are open to the public now, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, but we're very responsive. We answer the phone and answer emails. This is all of our kind of contact information for our office, and we'd love to hear from you for any kind of information about making your home more resilient and more energy efficient.
Mm-hmm. And one more question came up. Actually, a couple came in.
Okay.
They're asking if any of the upcoming sessions will deal specifically with solar options.
We do. I have to look at the workshop calendar, but I understand that we do have a solar and battery storage workshop coming up. If you want to check in, you can always, Patricia, I'm fairly certain that's in our workshop series for the summer.
Yes, it is. It will be one of the workshops. And when we send the link to the recording and the presentation, we'll make sure to include the schedule of future ones. That way you can automatically sign up. So it'll have the links where you can register directly to any of the upcoming ones.
And if you have questions about that specifically, you can always reach out to our office and we'll let you know. Yes. We can follow up with you and let you know exactly when that's scheduled. I just don't have the schedule in front of me right now. But we offer these workshops weekly. Mm-hmm. So when we release a new series, we generally do them at the same time, same day, to make it pretty easy to remember. So, and they're an hour long.
And also, if you follow the link on this slide, the Sonoma County gov/energy, the webinar schedule will be on there as well. And I think that's all the questions that were there.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So thank you all so much for spending the time with us today. We really love presenting these workshops, and I highly recommend, if you're considering any upgrades for your home, reaching out to our office. It's a very valuable hour to spend with our analysts here to talk about, upgrading your home. Better building consultations, awesome. Solar consultations, really wonderful. And we're just so happy to be able to provide that resource through our local government partnership programs. So I highly recommend the consultations, and we look forward to seeing you at our next workshop. Okay, I think that's a wrap.